In this episode, we go behind the headlights of America's most treasured automotive icon, the Cobra, developed by the legendary Carroll Shelby.
Carroll Shelby's personal garage may have hidden something his public legacy never revealed. When the doors were finally opened, investigators reportedly found a strange, undocumented car that appeared to fit nowhere in the official history of Shelby American. Was it a forgotten prototype, a private experiment, or evidence of a project someone wanted kept out of sight? The discovery quickly raised questions among enthusiasts and historians because the deeper they looked, the less certain the story became. So, what exactly was Carroll Shelby hiding behind those closed garage doors? The doors opened, then silence. The garage was not a museum, a showroom, or one of the carefully preserved spaces associated with Carroll Shelby's public legacy. It was private, quiet, and largely separated from the world that had spent decades documenting the legendary designer, racer, and builder. Then, at some point during the process of examining the property and its contents, the doors were opened. What waited inside immediately created a problem no one expected. There was a car. At first glance, it did not fit comfortably into any familiar chapter of Shelby's history. It was not instantly recognizable as a Cobra, a Shelby Mustang, or another publicly known project. Its shape appeared unusual, its configuration seemed unfamiliar, and the surrounding lack of clear documentation only deepened the confusion. The discovery was intriguing, not because everyone immediately knew what they were looking at, but because no one could confidently explain what it was. That uncertainty mattered. Carroll Shelby's career had been examined from almost every angle. His racing achievements, partnerships, designs, and business ventures had all become part of a well-documented automotive legacy. Yet, this vehicle appeared to sit outside that established record. If it was genuinely connected to Shelby, how had something so significant remained unknown? And if it was not, why had it been found in a private garage associated with his personal world? The first instinct was naturally to search for answers in the car itself. Its body offered clues, but not a simple identity. Its construction appeared different from the familiar machines that had made Shelby famous. There was no immediate explanation that could settle the matter, no obvious public record that instantly placed it within a recognized production program. Every detail seemed to raise another question. That was where the controversy began. Some interpretations could point toward an experimental vehicle, a forgotten test project, or an unfinished idea that never reached the public. Other possibilities demanded more caution, because a car's presence in a Shelby-associated garage did not automatically prove that Carroll Shelby personally designed every part of it. The discovery, therefore, had to be treated as a mystery rather than a solved legend. Still, the implications were difficult to ignore. A man whose work had shaped modern performance cars may have had a machine connected to his private world that escaped the official story. And before anyone could determine what the car truly was, one question had already become impossible to avoid. How could a vehicle linked to one of the most documented names in automotive history remain hidden for so long? The garage had revealed an object, but not its history, turning a simple discovery into a deeper investigation of Shelby's private work. What exactly was this machine built to become? And why did its design refuse to match anything in Shelby's known history? Was it a secret prototype, a private experiment, or evidence of something never meant to be discovered? Let's unravel the mystery. A machine without a past. The discovery had created a mystery. A closer look made it harder to understand. Once the vehicle was examined more closely, the problem was no longer simply that it had been found inside a private Carroll Shelby-associated garage. The greater problem was that the car itself seemed to resist identification. It carried the language of a performance machine, yet it did not belong to any familiar chapter of Shelby's public history. Its proportions were unusual, its shape difficult to place, and its configuration offered no answer. It did not present itself as an obvious Cobra, Shelby Mustang, or another recognized production model. Instead, it appeared to occupy an uncertain space between a finished automobile and an experiment. That distinction became important because the vehicle could not be understood simply by looking at its exterior. Investigators had to ask what lay beneath the unusual body and where its major components came from. Without a clear record connecting the machine to a known Shelby or Ford program, every detail became evidence that required interpretation. Was it an experimental prototype built to test an idea? Could it have been a heavily modified test vehicle assembled around an existing platform? Perhaps it was an unfinished design study that never progressed beyond the workshop. Another possibility was that it had been assembled from components taken from different projects, creating a machine never intended to fit an official production category. Each explanation changed the meaning of the discovery. If the car was a prototype, it might represent an idea that had been abandoned before the public ever saw it. If it was a test vehicle, its unusual appearance could have served a purpose that was never meant to become a showroom design. If it was an unfinished study or private build, then its connection to Shelby's world could be more complicated than the discovery initially suggested. That uncertainty created controversy. The presence of a mysterious vehicle in a Shelby-associated garage could make the connection seem obvious, but association alone did not prove who designed it, who built it, or what it was meant to become. The lack of documentation left room for competing interpretations, and the more investigators tried to place the car within history, the more elusive its identity became. What mattered now was not how dramatic the vehicle looked, but what its platform, components, and story could reveal. Somewhere between a forgotten experiment and an unknown private project, the car represented a missing piece of a larger puzzle. And until its true purpose could be established, one question remained hanging over the discovery: was it really a lost Shelby project, or had the garage preserved something far more complicated? No blueprint, no development file, no official trail. So who was this machine really built for? Was Shelby hiding an experiment, protecting a private client, or preserving something never meant to surface? And when investigators finally connected the missing clues, what did they discover waiting beyond the garage? Let's find out. The missing history deepens. The car's strange appearance had raised questions, but the search for answers soon uncovered an even bigger problem. There was no clear history to follow. Carroll Shelby's most famous creations were surrounded by records, photographs, engineering work, production references, and decades of public attention. His Cobra, Shelby Mustang programs, and other major projects had become deeply documented parts of automotive history. This vehicle, however, seemed to exist outside that familiar record. Investigators could not simply search for a model name and find an answer. There was no obvious design file that clearly identified the car, no confirmed development record that explained its purpose, and no straightforward production history that showed where it belonged. The absence of those details did not automatically prove that the vehicle was connected to a secret Shelby project, but it made the discovery far more difficult to authenticate. That distinction became crucial. A mysterious car can look important without having a documented history. Its appearance may suggest an experimental prototype, a modified test vehicle, or an unfinished design study. Yet none of those possibilities can be confirmed by appearance alone. Without records showing who designed it, who assembled it, or what program it belonged to, the machine remained suspended between evidence and speculation. The contrast with Shelby's public career only made the mystery more striking. He had spent decades creating vehicles that attracted enormous attention, from racing machines to high-performance road cars. Projects connected to his name were rarely ordinary. They were studied, photographed, raced, sold, and remembered. Yet this vehicle appeared to have avoided that entire process. If it had been intended for production, where was the trail? If it had been a serious development project, why had no clear record surfaced? One possibility was that the car had never been intended for public release at all. Perhaps it represented experimental work conducted outside a formal company program, where the goal was exploration rather than production. A personal garage could have provided the freedom to test an idea without the same expectations attached to an official Shelby American project. But even that possibility remained an interpretation, not a proven explanation. The deeper investigators looked, the less the mystery seemed to concern the car's appearance. The real challenge was establishing its past. A machine without a reliable history could not easily be placed within Carroll Shelby's legacy, no matter how intriguing its connection appeared. And that raised the question that now stood at the center of the investigation. If this vehicle truly belonged to Shelby's private world, who was it actually built for? And why had its story disappeared? Shelby spent his life pushing against limits. So could this strange machine represent an idea production rules never allowed him to pursue? Who built it? Why was it hidden? And what detail inside the garage could finally reveal whether this was Shelby's boldest experiment yet? Keep watching. The rebel behind the machine. The mysterious car no longer looked like a simple forgotten object. Its uncertain history had created a larger question about the man whose name appeared to surround the discovery. To understand why such a machine could have existed at all, investigators had to look beyond the vehicle and back at Carroll Shelby himself. Shelby had not remained only a racing driver. After building a reputation behind the wheel, he moved into a far more influential role as a designer, builder, and innovator. His career crossed the worlds of competition, performance cars, and major corporate partnerships. He worked with powerful companies, helped develop machines that became legends, and repeatedly pushed ideas that did not always fit comfortably within conventional automotive thinking. That history created a useful contrast. Official car programs were built around rules, budgets, production targets, safety requirements, emissions standards, and corporate approval. Every decision had to survive layers of review before an idea could reach the public. Shelby, however, had built much of his reputation by looking for ways around limitations. His approach was rooted in performance and instinct, even when the industry around him demanded compromise. That did not mean every unusual feature on the mysterious car could automatically be credited to Shelby. Its presence in a private garage associated with his world could not, by itself, prove that he personally designed every component or directed every stage of its construction. The evidence still had limits, and those limits mattered. Yet, the vehicle's apparent individuality made the connection difficult to dismiss entirely. It seemed to occupy the same uncomfortable space that had defined many of Shelby's most unconventional ideas. Outside the ordinary, difficult to categorize, and potentially shaped by a purpose that did not fit neatly into a production plan. If the car was an experiment, it could have represented an idea that never received corporate approval. If it was a private build, it may have existed simply because someone wanted to explore what was possible without having to satisfy a market. That was where the mystery became more personal. Carroll Shelby's public legacy was built from famous cars that the world could see, measure, race, and remember. But a private project would have operated under different rules. It might not have needed a showroom, a press release, or a production schedule. It only needed a reason to exist. The mysterious vehicle could therefore be viewed as a possible reflection of Shelby's lifelong willingness to challenge convention, but not as proof of a confirmed secret masterpiece. And as investigators tried to understand the machine, one possibility became harder to ignore. Perhaps its greatest clue was not what it looked like, but the kind of independent thinking that could have brought it into existence. Who helped turn an impossible idea into a machine powerful enough to vanish from history? Were the people behind it protecting a secret, or simply carrying different versions of the truth? And when the investigation reaches the most elusive witness, what hidden detail could finally change everything? Stay with us. The builders who knew too much. The car could not have appeared from nowhere. However incomplete, unusual, or undocumented it might have been, a one-off experimental vehicle required skilled hands. Someone had to shape its body, assemble its components, solve its mechanical problems, and decide what the machine was supposed to become. That shifted the investigation away from the car itself and toward the people who may have stood behind it. A project connected to Carroll Shelby's private world could potentially have involved fabricators, machinists, engineers, and trusted workshop personnel. Unlike a normal production vehicle, a one-off build would not necessarily pass through a large public team or generate the same trail of official records. A small group working privately could complete significant work without attracting the attention that normally followed a major Shelby project. That possibility made the silence surrounding the vehicle even more difficult to understand. If several skilled people had worked on it, why had no clear account of the project emerged? Why had no complete set of drawings, development notes, or public photographs appeared to explain its origin? The absence of evidence did not prove that nobody knew about the car. It only meant that the people who might have known had not left behind a simple, verifiable story. This was where the difference between testimony and speculation became critical. A former employee's memory could provide a valuable clue, but an anonymous claim could not automatically establish the vehicle's identity. Stories repeated years later could also change with time, especially when a mysterious car became connected to a famous name. One person might remember an experimental project, while another remembered only a collection of unusual parts or an unfinished idea. There was also another possibility. Some people may have known about the project and simply chosen not to discuss it. A private build could have been treated as personal work, a confidential experiment, or something that was never considered important enough to enter the public record. Silence, in that case, might have reflected privacy rather than conspiracy. But the uncertainty created its own tension. The more the investigation searched for the people behind the machine, the more important their missing accounts became. The car's history could not be reconstructed from metal and mechanical parts alone. Its story depended on the memories of the people who had seen it take shape, handled its components, or understood why it existed. That transformed the discovery completely. The garage had not simply preserved an unknown car. It may have preserved the remains of a project whose witnesses were scattered, silent, or uncertain. And somewhere within those missing memories could lie the explanation for what Carroll Shelby's mysterious machine was truly meant to be. What was Carroll Shelby really trying to create? A race-bred experiment, a secret engineering test, or something never meant for public roads? Why build a machine with no clear destination? And when the next clue surfaced, would it finally reveal what this mysterious car was truly built for? Stay glued. A machine searching for purpose. The questions surrounding the mysterious car had now changed. Investigators were no longer asking only where it came from or who might have worked on it. They were asking what it had been built to do. A vehicle can reveal much through its design, but without a clear purpose, even its most unusual features remain open to interpretation. That uncertainty placed the machine at the center of a deeper mystery. Several possibilities remained. It could have been a racing experiment created to test ideas that were never ready for competition. It might have served as a private engineering test bed, allowing components or concepts to be explored away from the demands of an official program. It could also have been a design exercise, built to examine a direction that never moved beyond the workshop. Another possibility was a production concept that failed to reach the public. Or perhaps it was simply a personal project with no commercial ambition at all. Each explanation changed the meaning of the discovery. A racing experiment would connect the car to Shelby's competitive instincts. A test bed would suggest that its value lay in what engineers could learn from it. A design study might reveal an idea that was abandoned before it could become a finished vehicle. A production concept would raise questions about why the project never advanced, and a private build would suggest that the car existed for a reason that had nothing to do with sales, publicity, or corporate approval. The unfinished and undocumented nature of the machine made those possibilities even more difficult to separate. A completed production car usually leaves a trail. A private experiment may not. If Carroll Shelby or people around him were exploring an idea simply because it was technically interesting, there may have been no market waiting for the result and no reason to prepare it for public release. That distinction was important because legendary car makers do not always build for business. Sometimes an idea survives because someone wants to know whether it can work. Sometimes a project continues because the process itself matters more than the final product. The mysterious vehicle could therefore represent ambition, curiosity, experimentation, or a combination of all three. No single interpretation could yet explain everything. The car's true purpose remained uncertain, and that uncertainty was more revealing than any easy answer. The investigation had moved beyond the physical machine and into the thinking behind it. If the vehicle really belonged to Carroll Shelby's private world, then the most important question was no longer simply who built it. It was what Shelby wanted it to become, and why that purpose never became part of the public story in the first place. Yet, the deeper investigators looked, the less certain the story became. Was this truly one forgotten Shelby project, or a machine assembled across different stages of development? Could its contradictions hide an unfinished experiment? And when the next clue surfaced, would it finally solve the mystery, or make everything even stranger? Stay tuned. When the evidence refuses to fit. The investigation had reached a point where the mysterious car seemed close to revealing its identity. Then, the evidence began pulling in different directions. The vehicle's appearance suggested one possibility. Its components raised another, and the timeline surrounding its supposed creation introduced more uncertainty yet. Instead of producing a clean answer, every new detail seemed to complicate the story. That was the problem with treating the car as a simple discovery. A vehicle can contain parts from different stages of development, especially if it was modified, abandoned, or preserved over time. The machine found in the garage might not look exactly as it did when work first began. Components could have been changed, ideas could have evolved, and an unfinished project might have remained in a state that never represented a final design. That possibility created a serious challenge for anyone trying to reconstruct its history. Did every part belong to the same original project, or had the vehicle changed as different ideas were tested? Without clear records, even a component that appeared significant could not automatically reveal when it was installed or why it was chosen. The question of Carroll Shelby's connection also required caution. A car physically associated with Shelby's private world was not necessarily a car entirely designed or built by Carroll Shelby. His name could be connected to a project in several ways. He might have directed an idea, approved work, examined components, or simply owned a vehicle that had passed through his circle. Each possibility carried a different meaning. That distinction became increasingly important as the mystery grew. The easiest explanation was also the most dramatic one, that the garage had revealed Carroll Shelby's lost final masterpiece. But the available evidence did not automatically support such a conclusion. The absence of documentation prevented investigators from making absolute claims about the vehicle's origin, development, or purpose. For some observers, that uncertainty might weaken the story. For others, it made the discovery more intriguing. A perfectly documented prototype could be explained through records. A machine with conflicting clues demanded investigation. Its story had to be reconstructed carefully, with every piece of evidence separated from assumption. The deeper the examination went, the harder it became to place the car inside a single, simple narrative. It might have been a forgotten Shelby experiment, a modified project, or a machine whose history had changed over time. What mattered was that the evidence refused to provide an easy answer. And, with every contradiction, one popular assumption became harder to defend. Perhaps this was not simply Carroll Shelby's lost masterpiece, but something far more complicated hiding behind his name. What if Shelby's most mysterious car was never meant to become famous at all? Was this unfinished machine a forgotten experiment, a private escape from expectations, or something he deliberately kept hidden? And when the garage reveals one final clue, will it change everything we thought we knew? Keep watching. The garage held his private side. The mystery surrounding the car had become more than a question of engineering. The deeper investigators looked, the more the garage itself began to matter. A personal workshop offered something that official company facilities could not: distance from deadlines, corporate expectations, public attention, and the pressure to turn every idea into a finished product. That possibility changed how the mysterious vehicle could be understood. Carroll Shelby's public life had been defined by famous machines, major partnerships, racing victories, and projects that became part of automotive history. But the private world behind that public legacy could have operated differently. A personal garage did not need to produce a showroom car. It could simply be a place where an idea was explored because it was interesting, challenging, or personally meaningful. The car's unfinished condition therefore became more difficult to interpret. It might have reflected changing priorities, limited time, health challenges, or the simple decision to abandon an experiment. There was no need to assume that every incomplete project represented failure. Some ideas are stopped because circumstances change. Others are left behind because the person who began them moves on to something else. That raised a more emotional possibility. Perhaps the vehicle had never been intended to become another public legend. It may not have been created for a press event, a production line, a racing program, or a collector's auction. It could have existed for a much more private reason: the desire to explore an idea without having to explain it to anyone. That interpretation also changed the meaning of its secrecy. The car may not have been hidden because it was a failed secret that someone wanted to conceal. It may simply have remained private because it was never meant to be shared. The absence of publicity, official promotion, and a clear place in the public record could therefore say less about the vehicle's importance than about the purpose behind it. For a man whose name had become inseparable from automotive legends, that distinction carried real weight. The world knew Carroll Shelby through the cars that became famous. A private project could reveal something different: the builder who continued thinking beyond the demands of business and legacy. The mysterious machine might therefore be valuable not because it was another confirmed masterpiece, but because it offered a possible glimpse into the space between public achievement and private curiosity. And if the garage had preserved something Shelby never intended the world to see, then the unanswered question was no longer simply what the car could have become, but why its unfinished story was allowed to remain his alone for reasons no one could explain. Yet the car's greatest secret may not be what it is, but why Shelby kept it hidden. Was it an abandoned experiment, a forgotten masterpiece, or something more personal? And who will decide its fate now that the garage has finally opened its doors? The mystery refuses to die. By the time the investigation reached its final stage, the garage had revealed something important without providing a complete answer. A mysterious vehicle had been found in a private Carroll Shelby associated space, yet its exact identity, purpose, and history remained uncertain. The discovery had produced clues, but not enough evidence to turn every possibility into fact. The strongest conclusion was also the most careful one. The car appeared to be an unusual, poorly documented machine connected in some way to Shelby's private automotive world. Beyond that, the evidence required caution. Its presence did not automatically prove that Carroll Shelby personally designed every part, directed every stage of construction, or intended the vehicle to become a production model. Those claims remained possibilities rather than established facts. That uncertainty, however, did not make the discovery meaningless. In some ways, it made the vehicle more significant. A fully documented prototype could be understood through records, dates, drawings, and official development history. This car offered something different. Its incomplete story forced investigators to examine the difference between what could be proven and what could only be suspected. The central questions therefore remained open. What was the machine originally built to do? Was it a racing experiment, a private engineering project, a design study, a possible production concept, or simply an unfinished personal build? Did every component belong to the same original project, or had the vehicle changed over time? And how much of its connection to Carroll Shelby could ultimately be verified? Those questions also created uncertainty about the car's future. It could be preserved exactly as it was found, allowing its condition to remain part of its story. It could undergo further examination, with specialists studying its components and construction for clues. It could eventually be restored or displayed publicly, or it could remain private, protected from the attention that might turn an unresolved mystery into a commercial spectacle. Each choice would shape how the vehicle was remembered. Restoration might make it easier to appreciate, but could erase evidence of its unfinished past. Public display could bring attention to the story, while continued privacy might preserve the very mystery that made the discovery so compelling. In the end, the garage may have revealed only one fragment of a much larger history. Carroll Shelby's legacy is built around the cars the world knows, but his private world may also have contained ideas that never became official products or public legends. And until the remaining questions are answered, the strange machine will continue to suggest that the final chapter of a legend may sometimes be hidden in the projects that never reached the spotlight. So, what do you think? Was Carroll Shelby's mysterious garage discovery truly an unknown masterpiece, or simply an unfinished experiment? Share your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more incredible stories.